Um, all right, it's June 3rd, 2024. This is Human Design Catalyst with your host, Jonah Dempsey. Hi, Richard and Brandy. Thanks for joining. Sirach, now Rachel, and Liz. So we've had a fun few weeks of base theory, and then last week we looked at the evolutionary steps, which was quite an interesting topic and one that I'd love to go into further, but I don't have much more to say about that for now. What I thought we would do today is return to a look at the codon rings. This is something that comes from the research of Richard Rudd and Gene Keys. And I know we were just chatting a moment ago now about the intersection of Gene Keys and human design. And I thought, well, that's actually an interesting opportunity. We never really look at Gene Keys stuff in HD Catalyst much. We have Brandy here tonight who knows quite a bit about Gene Keys, and I'd love to hear her feedback, and of course, anyone else who would like to share. So I thought there's plenty of places to start with the gene keys. You can start with the activation sequences. You can kind of look at how Rudd describes the gates, things like that. But one of the really fascinating aspects to me is the codon rings. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with the codon rings, this is something that came out of Rudd's research in the early 2000s, really before he'd even developed Gene Keys. I didn't realize how short amount of time Gene Keys has really been around. I mean, it was only really publicly promoted in 2009, even though it was the outcome of many years of research. But I mean, it's only really been around 15 years. It's kind of wild. I always just assumed it was a little bit older than that. And I was looking at the history of it and was like, wow, I guess that makes sense. Rudd kind of had his break with human design in the early 2000s. But for a while, he was actually developing a human design curriculum for Ra as sort of Ra's great champion. I mean, Rudd and Ra were really good friends, and it's a shame that Ra was not able to maintain that friendship, because I have no doubt that it was on Ra's side that the friendship fell apart, in part because he would make sometimes impossible demands on others to develop things and to work on things, and then sort of nix them and stuff like that. But in any case, the codon ring material really was very early. I mean, kind of even a precursor to Gene Keys, or what led to the development of Gene Keys and this idea of the connection to genetics, because it was in 2002 when Rudd was transcribing and editing Ra's material on the amino acids that a lot of this material started to take form. And Rudd is a very generous person. I mean, so is Ra, but Rudd puts a lot of free material out online, and he actually has this wonderful graphic that he made showing the codon rings with the names that he came up with that are pretty evocative names. They're pretty cool names, like the Ring of Fire and the Ring of Water, the Ring of Miracles, the Ring of Light. I mean, very interesting names, right? So what I thought we would do today is maybe pick anyone who's here who we look at their personality sun, because that's probably a gate that they're somewhat familiar with. So anyone who wants to volunteer or feels called to explore their personality sun, and we would start there and look at what ring it's a part of. And then I have there's two good Gene Keys sources for the gates, or the keys as they call them. I have the 64 ways here, which is kind of subsequent contemplations on the keys after the first kind of, there was the first Gene Keys book, which I guess Rudd wrote over about 7 years. And then this is sort of his reflections, deeper reflections on the keys. And I thought that that would be a good place to start. And yeah, if anybody has a gate that they want to look at, maybe their personality sun. Yeah, Andrea Rachel Wolf is a very interesting source as well. I've seen a lot of her videos. She recently did a whole thing on manifestation, which is a bit of a taboo topic in human design. It's funny to me that we're in a field that it's like taboo to talk about, like positive thinking and stuff like that. Yeah, well, I don't think it was public. It was we're part of, unless I'm mistaken, we're part of a group called Human Design chart.com or something, and they sell the chart software. We have it for Signpost as well. They just kind of provide chart software, and they host sort of private videos, and they had a series. I'll have to follow up on that, but in any case, yeah, I'm definitely interested in her work. I mean, I like to keep tabs on everyone, because we all have unique outer authority. And as you were saying just in our last session now, I really appreciated you highlighting that it is interpretation, and it is interesting to see how different people understand human design because tell what to align for that there. Sorry. You can jump in on audio anytime you want, by the way. This is like a very open forum.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, but
Oh,
yeah, totally. Just I'm 4/6, so I'm all about seeing what everyone is up to, and I love just all the different mutations and the interpretations there. So
absolutely.
I like to keep tabs as well, but I just had no idea that Andrea Reckel-Wolf was
Yeah,
doing.
I'll have to follow up on that. Just a moment here. Actually, I think I can just follow up now. But yeah, and I'm going to be keeping tabs on it with this new thing called the Human Design Magazine, which I just found out about that you're starting and or have started. And yeah, let me see what it was here. I could be mistaken. Oh, I'm finding. So she's doing some HDS stuff. I guess I might have gotten that confused because I'm not finding it in my email.
Are you talking about
Maybe it was
uh
somebody else. Maybe it
my
was.
my body graph chart? That's the other, like, it's a new.
Yeah, they're always doing. Okay, here was it. It was let's see. Maybe it wasn't Andrea Rachel Wolf. It was who was it?
Welcome to Body.
Oh my God, that's loud. Sorry. Terrified. No, it was Leanne Wolf. I'm sorry, it was Leanne Wolf.
Leanne Wool.
Leanne Wolf. No, I know Andrea Rachel Wolf too. I just got them confused. The two wolves of human. No, that makes a lot more sense though. It only went
Well,
through my
I
email.
do
It makes
I do love Leanne,
yeah.
and so does Rachel. So
Yeah.
yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, that was
that's
it. That
where
makes a
she's
lot more
taking it.
sense though, because I would
Yeah.
have been a lot more surprised if that was Andrea Rachel. I would have been way more surprised. So I'm glad we cleared that up. I'm glad that I'm not spreading misinformation here. So hi there,
Yeah.
Lasita. I see we've been joined by Lasita. So okay, so yeah, so let's take a look at the codon rings, and I see that Srock wants to look at gate 52. And this is your personality sun, Srock? Is that
Yeah, it is.
yeah. Yeah, excellent. Okay. It's also James Alexander's personality sun. So I'll have to share with him later what I've learned from this. He's not attending tonight, but he gets the downloads in the kitchen. He just he asks me what we figured out. So okay, so let's take a look at gate 52. This is in the ring of seeking, and we'll have to see what this is always kind of the question. What did Richard Rudd mean by these names? And lucky for us, he actually has little descriptions here that he's made available. So if we look at the ring of seeking, which has quite a few gates in it, and it's the amino acid serine, this codon ring is the great pressure codon inside human DNA. I guess that makes sense with all of these root gates, or with a lot of root gates anyway. Each of the 6 gene keys within this group, or 6 gates within this group, drives an aspect of human evolutionary movement. In the shadow frequency, this pressure creates stress and fear. In the higher frequencies, this pressure generates creativity and aspiration to rise up to greater spiritual awakening. Together, these 6 pressures drive you to seek answers that can bring an end to the longing inside you. All seeking is therefore partially rooted in dissatisfaction, and all seeking eventually leads you inwards. It is this turning in, like this turning inwards, he's saying, that unlocks the huge reservoirs of vitality that are available to you when you relax enough. As you see that all seeking is simply life looking for itself, you begin to stop seeking. As the pressure within you falls away, the vital energy becomes clearer and more radiant within you. So yeah, I guess we get a little hint at what he was thinking when he calls it the ring of seeking. Is I mean, it's definitely not where I would have immediately gone with it. I mean, when I think of pressure centers, I don't really think of seeking. Usually I think of seeking in the G center or design of a seeker or things like that. But I mean, it is an interesting point here that it is about the pressure to seek that ultimately that seeking itself is driving us to turn inwards. And then we actually gain more access to our vitality through relaxation. And I know I'm a 52 design sun, and I definitely get pretty stressed out. I'm pretty sure the keynote Rudd gives for 52 and its shadow is stress, and I can recognize that stress. And I mean, Richard Corbett is also a cross of healing like myself, born September 26th, I'm September 25th. So we both have that design Sun 52. So I don't know if you'd like to speak to that, Richard or Brandy. I know you know the gene keys pretty well, if you have any associations with this. Yeah.
Well, with the codon rings in general, they tell the story of the involution, right? Not the evolution. It tells the story of how to come in to go out. It tells the story about how to find that center point. Each of them do. They each, to me, remind me of my reflections, my Kabbalistic reflections, and my reflections on the Platonic solids. If you really look at them and you look at the way that they come together, you can see some of that like circuitry that's happening. And
Yeah, I mean,
all
they're even laid out like Platonic
right,
solids here. Like we have a cube
right.
and we have a kind of, yeah.
Yeah, so they are in, and they're like this. I don't know if you've ever seen this artist. His name is Daniel Diaz Martinez or something like that. I'll put it in the chat to know for sure. But he does this deck, and this deck you put together almost like a circuit board, and you kind of come together with whatever meaning comes to you through this. And actually, Richard Rudd introduced me to this artist. So I feel like I believe that maybe there's some imagination of the circuitry of human awakening that happens not, in our experience and in our behavior, but also in the genetic and epigenetic expressions of our body. So if we're talking about 52, when we're in dissatisfaction, the epigenetic structure of our body is dysregulated, unregulated, or upregulating dis-ease. Whereas when we move through, we surrender to the expression of the frequency in our body and allow it, we will see where the gift is, which will then change our epigenetic structure to allow a higher voltage. And so I look at this kind of like a circuit board and how the voltage moves through humanity, and how each of those keys themselves help to do their part to hold the increased voltage. And they each have a story in that evolution and involution of humanity. That's what I feel about those ones.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that he put the oppositions have these two lines between them, I'm noticing.
Right.
That's such a cool way of graphically laying it out. I mean, it really makes it look
And they go
much
back and
more.
forth, these oppositions. They have almost keys to each other in an almost infinity symbol-like way. When we were in one shadow, the other's gift brings the city, and back and forth in those ways.
So you're saying that part of the key to 52 is also in 58, and that if you're feeling really stressed out in 52, you can kind of look at what 58 is about, and that might break that loop from 52.
That's right. That's right. It breaks you out of the frequency, being that frequency of the shadow, if you will, being the one that holds the frequency of your body through the knowing, or that expression of that other pure frequency. So this is why I think keynotes are also important again here. Just like they are important in human design, because they carry such a, they calibrate on the David Hawkins scale of consciousness, these keynotes do. And so I'm not just talking about some mental activity of feeling 58 when you're in the shadow of 52, or dissatisfaction, right? When you're feeling stressed, you're dissatisfied. I'm not just talking about the mental knowing of that. I'm talking about the way that that word calibrates on the scale of consciousness to bring it into the frequency of your body that changes that, or lifts the dissatisfaction and the stress loop that you are in.
Yeah, and I see that gate 58, some of the keynotes are the gift is vitality, the city is bliss, and that experiencing vitality and bliss, I mean, are perhaps the cures for the stress that helps rise up out of that. Gene key 52 here, I just have the book here. So maybe we can hear from Sirach also if you'd like to comment on any of this. The shadow is stress, the gift is restraint, and the city is stillness. And that's kind of an interesting one, that such a rarefied, highest expression is simply stillness. It's such a simple thing. I mean, it would almost think of that as kind of the basic, but it's like, that's actually hard to achieve, perhaps, is kind of the idea here. So
And
Yeah.
stillness in frequency is what leads to bliss and experience.
I see. Bliss being the from
Mhm.
Gene Key 58. Okay, yeah, I see how you can kind of weave these together a bit. And yeah, if anyone wants to comment, if you have any comments, Sirach, I know, this is your personality son, so maybe intimately familiar to you.
Yeah, I do have some things to say about 52. I have noticed that it is quite linked to the bliss of 58 and the restraint being the gift. Like more and more I notice how doing less and restraining myself from doing the impulse based on the stress that I may be experiencing in any given moment. When I hold back, um, there's a moment of like I don't know, I guess discipline. And after I sort of uh, show that discipline to myself and don't do the thing that I'm wanting to do, I experienced this sort of synchronicity with life where the thing that I wanted to do ends up getting done for me. And the thing that I thought I needed to do ends up being completely unnecessary. And I feel like the stillness, I don't know if I've experienced the city fully, but I feel like I've experienced it in small little moments where it's not so much that nothing's moving or anything. I feel like the stillness for me is that I'm like on a train where you can be moving really quickly, but you're actually not doing anything. I feel like the stillness is that sort of feeling where things are happening really easily and swiftly and in flow, but there's nothing that I need to do.
Yeah, I mean, that's I definitely have felt a lot of the pressure, and for me, because this is part of my incarnation cross, and I'd also be curious to hear your experience of this, Richard. It's that when there's so much pressure to act, that what I really have to do is actually resist the urge to kind of get rid of all that pressure. It's like it would feel so good to just be free of this pressure. It would feel so good to just do something. But instead, it's like, no, that would be somehow escaping it. What I really need to do is just sit still. And it's almost like I think of like Atlas holding up the earth or something. Like you're sitting still, but you're holding something. Now, maybe that's me being too stressed. I mean, here's the funny thing is my perspective coming from human design is always kind of like, oh, it's in the root. I'm equipped to have this strong root that can sort of like flex my muscles in stillness. Every time I read Richard Rudd, is like the opposite. He's like, let go of all the stress, just relax, take it easy. You don't have to do anything. And it sounds to me almost like you're saying that a little more like you've discovered you can just let things happen and not take responsibility for it. I mean, I always kind of start with the channels in particular are the equipment that we have. And so I'm like, I have the 952. I am equipped to resist the pressure to move. So it's like, is this going to get done? I don't know. Is it? Like I can kind of resist the urge to like hurry up. I can resist the urge to speed through something and do a kind of half-assed job because I'm in a big hurry. And I can like sort of impose this weight on actually in the double meaning of weight, like this heaviness that can't be budged that makes people wait because I have the defined root. And so it's like, it'll be done when it's done. But again, that's my human design perspective coming at it. Totally different. Every time I read Richard Rudd, I'm like, wow, he came at this stuff from a completely different perspective. It's like in human design, we talk about the not self. He talks about the shadow. And for me, talking about the not self, I kind of would say the not self for me as a generator is initiating. And I'm actually equipped to resist the urge to initiate and to just sort of like dig my heels in the ground and stand there. And that's part of my 52, right? That's how I look at it. But for him, looking at the shadow frequency, it'd almost be like, no, Jonah, you're not meant to just be there and be stressed out and dig your heels in the ground. You're meant to be restrained, yes, but not like this teeth gritted thing. So it's just kind of a different perspective. I mean, I like it. I'm not disagreeing with this perspective at all. It's just kind of like he makes it sound so I don't know, so magical. He has a really magical way of describing it. I take it more literally of like, okay, I have 52. Like, I'll be damned if I'm going to hurry up for you. I'm going to be digging my heels in the ground. But see, I also have the whole channel, so part of that could be my conflation with that life force energy. Um, Now, do you ever experience shallow breathing?
I feel like
Yeah. And is that something that you've noticed, like when you're more stressed out, you breathe more shallowly, or yeah. He kind of puts it
you're talking,
backwards. He says stress is caused by shallow breathing. That's such a funny way to look at it. It's like he says literally stress is a manifestation of shallow breathing. I would put it the other way around. Like I'm stressed out, so I'm breathing shallowly, but I kind of like this, reversal. He's like, "Oh no, you're not breathing shallowly because of stress. You're creating the stress by shallow breathing. Like if you just take deep breaths, the stress goes away." And that's like a really funny reversal because it's so easy to imagine the stress as something out there, and then the shallow breathing is the reaction to it. But he's like, "Oh no, you're just breathing in a shallow way, and that's creating the experience of stress."
Again, the magic of the gene keys brings you right to 0 point every time, brings you right back inside and says that nothing exists besides you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is empowering. It's funny because I think people in human design can often see the gene keys as like positive mental attitude, positive thinking, but I'm seeing it a little differently as it's just,
I,
he has a different perspective. His perspective is actually there's a lot more in your power than you might realize. And yeah, we can go along with no choice all day long, but that doesn't change the fact that there are certain things that we do that create our own dilemmas and create our own problems. So
Yeah,
yeah, it is kind
I
of
think it
interesting.
teaches perception being the only choice, not
There you
biology,
go. Yeah.
just perception.
Yeah, we've talked about this before about how it's like you can't really change things, but you can learn or not learn. And when you
Mhm.
learn and when you really strive to learn and kind of strive, here's the funny thing I was thinking about. I always get in these no choice conversations, particularly with Mark Germain, who's like the most hardline no choice guy in the world. He's like, there's no choice about anything. There's no choice. You're never gonna have any choice. Doesn't matter if you have a positive mental attitude, negative mental attitude, makes no difference whatsoever. Things are the way they are. And what I always remember is I was 13 years old once, and I went out to the movies with a friend. And we saw a comedy movie, kind of a dumb comedy. And I remember before the movie, we agreed we were going to laugh at every joke. No matter what, we were going to laugh. And that movie was so funny. I mean, by the end, we couldn't control it. We were just laughing until we had tears. In the beginning, it was kind of like, oh, that's a kind of a dumb joke, but we like laughed and we forced ourselves to laugh a little bit. And I think about that a lot because I'm like, wow, if you're in a relationship with someone and you just kind of like have that attitude up front of just, I'm going to accept and love this person no matter what they do. I'm just going to assume that that's exactly what I needed to experience, that that's exactly who they are. I'm not going to be like, oh, that's the not self, or oh, that's, it's so annoying you do this. I wish you did something else. You just kind of start with this radical acceptance of like, I'm going to laugh at every joke. I'm going to embrace every foible, the relationship goes a lot better. So, I mean, I'm a no choice guy too, but I also kind of say attitude matters. Attitude changes things. And maybe
I say
that's
it all
part
the
of,
time too, Jonah. I
yeah.
think it's one of the least talked about topics in human design that is most needed. It's a huge factor.
Yeah, what attitude do you bring to the table? That's a huge part of
Right.
it. It's like if you bring a crappy attitude, nothing's going to happen. Nothing's going to get done. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. If you come into it with, I'm not going to learn anything here, you're probably not going to learn anything. And if you come into it with, wow, people have a lot of interesting things to offer, you're probably going to learn a lot of interesting things. So absolutely. Well, that's why I'm enjoying looking at this Gene Keys perspective. We've been doing this at our Tuesday night overlay. It's not broadcast online, but it's our in-person event here in Santa Fe. We've been doing a little Gene Keys. Last week we did Mayan astrology, but the couple weeks before we did Gene Keys. And it's such a fresh perspective because it's like, I can see why a lot of people in human design are not into Gene Keys. And I understand and respect that because it is a different approach. It is a very different approach. But I also love that human design grew big enough that it could like split or something. I love that it could split and that there could actually be this whole other school that does have its own offerings and its own interpretations. And kudos to Rudd for really developing an extremely rich, detailed understanding, really. And that's simultaneously compatible in a lot of ways, but also fresh in a lot of ways.
It's very feminine. It is the feminine approach, whereas I believe human design, and I've studied both extensively, is the masculine approach. And I think that the uh, blooming awareness gets to benefit from having both. from being able to bring the right and the left into their understanding and awareness of who they are. It's great to know my biology, but what the fuck's my biology doing? And why do I have such problems with it? There's the gene keys. Here's how to reconcile and to see the conditioning that you have when you have a problem because you're stressed out, instead of just arriving and embracing stress so that you can see where your vitality lives. That's the deconditioning process, is to be able to embrace the shadow, to be able to see where let the gift emerge from the conditioning. So I love the two. I think they're so, it's the marriage. It's the marriage of the feminine and masculine coming together. I don't think one stands on legs by themselves,
Yeah, absolutely. And I see your comment there, Rachel, and we can get to that momentarily. Absolutely. And Sarak is also saying that what line it is really matters as well. And yeah, the lines obviously are very important. Let's just look a little bit more. Let's just see a little bit of more on 52, and then we can kind of either move on, or we can just talk about how, yeah, like this keynote of seeking. And does this mean that in some sense, anyone born with their personality sun in this ring of seeking, that part of their purpose is fulfilled through seeking, right? I mean, the personality sun is a big part of who you are, and the pressure to seek, and that ultimately the seeker is driven inward because they don't find what they're looking for out there. So let's see just a little bit of what Rudd has to say here. The dilemma of shallow breathing, and stress is a manifestation of shallow breathing. Oh yeah, and please, I'd love to hear your comments, Rock. Yeah.
I was actually just thinking about the um oh man, I think I might have lost it. I think I might have just lost it. Oh yeah, no, so it was the seeking aspect and 52 and stillness, and how 53 and 60 and a lot of the root gates, they're all so fundamental in their frequency, and they have this sort of element, like joy, for example, is such a fundamental element of like the human experience, and fantasy and stillness and beginnings, like maturation and limitation. uh and I was like reflecting on my experience with when things have come into my life easily, and it's almost like there's a part of my mind or conscious reality that is it seems, I don't know a better way to put this. It seems like it's a step ahead of what's happening. So I want what's happening to catch up with what's in my mind. And then the times when I let go, and my 52 is in gate 2, in line 2, which is fixed in detriment. And it's I think the like supposed inaction for the benefit of assessment, at the detriment of others. So when I've noticed, when I remove myself from situations where other people are involved, then all the things that I wanted to happen with those people ends up happening after I remove myself from it, in a really weird backwards way. So it's strange how it's like the thing about the root for me that I'm noticing is that it's so like a ship, like a massive cruise ship. They just do like 1 degree turns that make massive shifts, that massive impacts.
Yeah, and I like what you were pointing out about the root. I want to address Now's question as well, but I wanted to just show something interesting for those who saw last week's session, and if not, I'll get it. If it's not uploaded already, it'll be on the video archive. What we looked at last week was the 62-step sequence over the round of 17,000 years, basically, or sorry, 19,000 years, 19,776 years. And that's a very large scale sequence of evolution. In our most recent time, kind of our current round, it's really just the evolution that led to our current day and age. One of the interesting things you notice is that the root, most of the steps in the root come very late. The first step was step 19, because the steps go in the order of the king wind sequence. And so step 19 was probably, 14,000 years ago. But step 54 is the step we're in right now. And step 53 was the step we were in before. We still haven't even gotten to step 60 or step 58. So actually 3 of the steps, let's see, step 54 step 53 and step 52. This goes back to around probably 1400, 1200 or 1400 AD. So since around 1400, somewhere in there, we've only been in root steps. How funny is that? We've been in step 52, step 53, step 54. If this is foreign to people, check out Ra's work on the evolutionary steps. And then last week's session, we looked at the evolutionary steps. But the short version of it is that the evolutionary steps go in the order of the numbers. So the very first step is gate 1 and 2. Those happen at the same time. That happened in like 15,000 BC. Then step 3 began, which was like the beginning of mutation. Then step 4, we had the answers since the beginning. We just didn't have the right questions. We don't get the right questions till the end. The answers were right in front of us. Then we had step 5, the beginning development of patterns. Step 6, the beginning development of mating. Step 7, the beginning development of leadership. Step 8, making contributions to each other, and so on. But it's funny because when you look at the root, these are like late steps, very late steps in the development. So on one level, I totally agree, Srock, these are foundational human experiences. On another level, they're actually modern, recent developments. Kind of a funny idea that actually these processes, like the ability to finally be still didn't really happen until the 1500s, 1600s. Like depending on how you calculate when that step occurred, that was ultimately when we were actually able to begin to develop scientific thought, a process that began far, far in prehistory with Gate 9. We were only able to develop it very recently because we finally were able to sit still long enough to do it. We weren't, caring about other things. So how long does the gate stay in a step? Well, it varies. And it went from around 300 something years up to around 137 years now. So if we look at the 137-year figure that Ra gives at one point, that would actually put the beginning of step 52 exactly in 1615. But then elsewhere, Ra mentions that step 52 occurred around 1400. So he is a little wiggly around the time frame. What he does say is that the steps are not equidistant, that time actually does start moving faster in some sense, in the sense that steps get shorter and shorter and shorter. So a step that used to take 300 or 400 years now only takes 130 years, like that. It's kind of interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And we know that on February 15th, 2027, we enter into step 55 or the 55th gate. And so if you just count, and we also know that 63 and 64 take place at a similar step. So if you just make equidistant divisions until the end of the round in like 3263 common era, it's around 137 years. I think 137.3 years. Okay, well, anyway, this is all covered in the evolutionary step material. I just kind of brought it up because it's an interesting perspective of like, oh, when did the root really develop? The sacral began developing very early with gate 3. And this actually gets to your question now, which is one of your first questions about after learning about HD was how did your sacral become programmed to respond in the first place? And now, do you have a defined sacral? Is that part of it? Or are you saying undefined?
Yeah. Well,
It's
I'm
defined.
a generator,
You're a
and
generator. Yeah. Okay.
of course, the first thing you learn is
Yeah.
But I was wondering, okay, why is my sacral responding yes to this, no to that? How was it programmed that way? And is this really healthiest for me? It's kind of a tangent there, but
No, it's not. I mean, it's a really great question. I mean, it's kind of, and even just the use of the term programmed. I mean, I usually think of programmed as like the program kind of has our DNA set up to automatically do something. And it's funny because I don't usually think of the sacral that way, but I guess it kind of is. It's set up to do that. I mean, my only answer to that is really that it's basically a reservoir of energy and it's kind of naturally available to certain things. And it's the same way as like, why am I programmed to find someone attractive? Why am I programmed to find food appetizing? Why am I programmed to be like, ooh, I want a bite of that cookie, or it's a hot day and there's a cold waterfall, and like I'm like, ooh, I want to jump in the cool water. Like all of these kind of things are something sympathetic between something in me and the outer world. So if I find someone attractive, I have some inner image. This was Jung's thesis that we have to have an inner archetypal image of the other within us. I can't be attracted to a woman if I don't have an inner woman already that somehow matches up. And I can't find food appetizing if I don't already have an inner appetite. I can't find water comforting if I'm not burning up and having some idea of wanting to, get rid of the frustration of the heat. So I think a lot of this is very primal and just has to do with the binary of frustration and satisfaction. And as much as we kind of talk bad about frustration sometimes, it really is what leads to the greater satisfaction. If something can't frustrate you, it can't satisfy you either. And anything that can satisfy you automatically can also frustrate you. Like that is literally the binary. Like instead of saying even, wow, you're so satisfying to me, it's like, wow, you have the ability to satisfy or frustrate me. Most people can neither satisfy nor frustrate. And that's kind of an interesting thing to look at as well, is that these are sort of built-in processes. I actually loved Genoa Bliven's explanation for how some of this might work. It was in a lecture he did years and years ago. You might remember this one, Lisita, if you have an encyclopedic knowledge of his lectures, as I imagine you might. But it was a lecture where he described the evolution of the human, and he said, well, human DNA is shared with so many different things. It wasn't human to begin with. It was really, it all began in this sort of protozoic slime, and that ultimately this algae or slime kind of existed for millions of years, receiving being pelted by neutrinos. And he kind of likened it, I'm pretty sure, to the way that the eyeball forms, because it's this thinnest membrane that gets pelted by photons until it eventually responds. It's kind of like the sacral, right? Like the sacral gets hit by the outer world until it eventually responds, and it eventually is able to form some sort of response. And so the eye forms and sight forms in response to the photon. The DNA programming forms in response to the neutrino pelting it for just millions of years over and over in the same annual cycles and the same thing. And then eventually this turns into evolution. And I just loved that. He has such a vast mind for these things, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like the sacral probably eventually emerged as a center because it was just pelted by enough outer stuff that like eventually it was kind of like either building up a defense to it or kind of responding by softening to it, because that's really what it's doing. It's a yes or no. I mean, it's a softening or a hardening. It's basically a tensing up or a relaxing in some sense even. And some people don't even have sacral. They just say they feel it as like a tension. They just feel it as like flexing almost, like it's this kind of tense thing. Yeah, yeah. You'll have to ask him. I mean, it was years ago. It was. I wish I could remember which lecture it was, but you could just say, did he ever describe the evolution of DNA from protozoic sludge getting pelted by neutrinos? That's the one that I remember. Was that explanation? So, well, okay, well, let's see, and then we'll go on. And yeah, I see what you're saying. Let's see, comment from Rachel that it's based on light forms, which is what we are. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we very much are frequencies, many frequencies. Okay, well, I want to get on to Rachel's question on the Ring of Trials. I just want to make sure we kind of talked enough about gene key 52 here. A lot to say. I mean, it's definitely an interesting and very different perspective than my understanding of 52, but very compatible. It's like compatible, but something that I would not have normally approached. I mean, I can definitely see the keynote restraint, the city of stillness. These make a lot of sense, um, but yeah, I didn't. And then I guess the connection to rhythm, which is the dilemma of 58. And here Rudd is saying that it's our breathing is all about our rhythm, that our rhythm can move out of kilter from shallow breathing. We create interference, we move out of harmony with nature. And that's the experience of stress. So that stress is not being in rhythm, kind of an interesting way to look at it. I mean, I usually think of stress as like there's too much to do and I can't do it and fast enough, and there's too many demands or too much chaos or something like that. But he's saying, no, it's really just that stress is our body telling us we've moved out of harmony, and that we can even become addicted to stress and the hormones it releases, like adrenaline. No one enjoys it. It's deeply uncomfortable, but then we can become addicted to it, which is a funny idea. Like, yeah. When we're stressed, time is always running too fast or too slow. So, and it can also be the feeling of being stuck. Yeah, these are all good observations. Interesting stuff there. Well, yeah, if anyone has any more comments on 52, otherwise let's take a look at the stop codons. I see now's comment about a friend speculating that stop codons are connected to health issues, and then Rachel saying she has all three of the stop codons. So that is, the buck stops with Rachel, I guess. Let's see. So this is the ring of, where is it? The ring of trials, 12, 33, 56. And it looks like it has this interesting parallel with the ring of Gaia. Yeah, what a cool layout. What an interesting way to lay it out. Okay, well, the ring of trials. Let's see what Rudd has to say about it. The three gene keys that make up this unique codon group are related to what science terms stop or terminator codons, behaving as a seal that closes up the places where we leak energy. Such chemical punctuation marks have an unusual role of importance within the totality of the genetic code itself. When activated, this codon ring begins to unplug humanity from the illusory world of the outer senses. On a purely archetypal level, the three stop codons of the Ring of Trials lay out the great dramatic script of evolution itself, testing human beings on their road to self-realization. Every human awakening must arouse the hero or heroine inside, and that inner being must face its mythical trials. What a deep, this would take like an hour just to unpack this paragraph. It's kind of hard. It's hard doing gene keys in brevity. You know what I mean? It's hard to kind of jump from one to the next because I feel like each of these sentences just packs so much into it. But I do have to admire Rudd for taking these seemingly simple keynotes like trials. I would think like, oh, you're going to be up against challenges. And then he says, well, we each face our mythical trials because there's the trials of our, awakening, that it really is about this theme of awakening. Then when I think of stop codons, I would usually think of like stopping a process or just saying this is over or ending or something. But no, that would be more like channel of maturation thing. He's saying that what it's actually here to do is to get us to stop seeing the Maya and the outer senses as the only reality and getting us to unplug and kind of turn inward again, like we were talking about with Gate 52. So yeah, really interesting. He takes a lot of left turns. It's like you kind of think you know where he's going, and then he definitely goes in some interesting directions. So yeah, I'm not sure where to start with this. Brandy, if you have any insights,
do.
please. I'd love to. Yeah.
I spent a long time paying attention to these and comparing them to the 64 steps that Ra talks about, and then putting them together and taking them apart. And this one, to me, if I keynote 56, 33, and 12, this is about remembering the intoxication of myself. And that is self-realization. That's the trial, is remembering if we think about 56 is intoxication, 33 is remembering, 12 is the expression
Yeah, of the
of
individual. Absolutely.
individualness. Artfully. So it's the artful expression of remembering my divinity.
Yeah, what an interesting way to keynote those. I haven't really ever thought about those gates in that way. And I see that 33 has the shadow of forgetting, the gift of mindfulness, and the city of revelation. So even just those keynotes are kind of interesting. I always, I think of it as memory, of course, but the shadow being forgetting, that
And it's
definitely
forgetting
has its-
self. It's forgetting your
Mhm.
role. It's forgetting that you are light.
Hmm. And he says that 33, he connects here to the gate of active imagination that Jung developed, that being mindful is not just, being mindful of bodily sensations or things like that. It's also the active imagination, that the 33 is a lover of story, song, myth, and archetype, is, adept at rituals, which bring presence and mindfulness. Drinking tea can be a ritual, eating can be a ritual, working can be a ritual. And so, yeah, that's a really nice way to look at it. That this is,
And 56 is the intoxication of that story. It's the expression of the light of remembering myself.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see the 56 shadow is distraction, the gift is enrichment, and the city is intoxication, like
Mhm.
you're saying, and its dilemma about pleasure and pain. Yeah, I never really made its connection. I mean, it kind of makes sense. Stimulation, right? I mean, but stimulation is intoxication. That's what intoxication is in some ways. So that is what a interesting connection. I mean, these are very deep keynotes, and I definitely think these are worthy of deeper investigation. But it's cool to see their connection because I don't often look at the connection between 12, 33, and 56.
Mhm.
I don't often think about what they have to do with each other, or any of that.
And
I
if
mean,
you
there's different
look at
perspectives.
if you look in these Gene Key's book itself, you'll see the reactive and repressive natures of all of these.
Right,
So
right. Where you're trying to fight against it or you're kind of reacting and overdoing it. Yeah.
exactly. It's
Yeah.
like the mythological story of your conditioning is written in those reactive and repressives when we resist the shadow or we resist the city, because we sometimes also resist that as well. And how do we do it? We do it through those coping mechanisms. So this is just a beautiful way as a therapist that I've been able to address a lot of maladaptive neurology that we absolutely get addicted to.
Absolutely. Well, I'm loving this. Well, if anyone else has any comments or thoughts on this ring, I mean, I don't know but where to go with it so much other than I'd love to hear your comments, Rachel, please.
So as you were sharing and reading about the whole thing in the little description, talking about how it's related to like the hero or heroine inside of each of us. So this is what I'm thinking. It's like the whole thing, Ring of Trials, is like when you think of yourself as like having this heroic journey instead of just suffering, like it's like a much more it's pleasant way to endure like life. So and then it's interesting because as they're all the stop codon and they have like so it's like you can only really do that type of reflecting about yourself being a hero in your own journey after you've already had the journey. It's like you don't, when you're in the thick of the heroic situation, it's rare, it's possible that you could have a moment of like awareness that like this is a trial. Like, well, I always think of birth, like childbirth, because that's one of the moments where you're like, there's no going back, you have to go forward, and it's heroic, and it's like how you encounter it, like is this, and I do a lot of work with pregnant women and postpartum depression, and their birth story, how they look back on it is really important. Like there's so many women who suffer greatly from feelings of failure when their birth didn't go as planned or as they wanted or whatever. And there's so many things about it. It's like a perfect example of just like what it is to be human at all. This like how it is to come into the world. It's like fraught with peril. And it's like, dashed hopes and expectations from the beginning, right next to like fulfilled hopes and, better than your dreams right there. So I see it as like, because I have my nodes as the 33 and the 56. It's interesting too, and it's actually one of the 56 is one of the only things that is in my definition with the 1156. The 12, they're all in the throat, right? So it's like this thing about like sharing, like this thing that happens when people share their story of their trial with another person is it changes from being something that they just personally suffered inside themselves to something that is beneficial for other people to have the ability to vicariously benefit from in some capacity. So yeah, that's just some of the things that came up for me.
Well, and that's, as you're saying that, I mean, I'm definitely thinking of the 33, and here's just a little bit of what Red has to say about 33 is that when you forgive yourself those moments of forgetting and harvest the fine moments, you will imprint those moments over and over and over again. So you basically, through the act of remembering, you can kind of summon up those moments into your life, maybe those heroic moments even. And that actually has a positive benefit for you, that it's not just about being mindful in the sense of being present with your current bodily sensations or something like a yoga nidra. It's like being mindful in the sense of mindful of what memories you relive over and over, because every time you relive those memories, that imprints you with that vibration, and it can fill you with laughter or tears. It can, you know, bring you what's most precious and sweet. It can bring release. It can so yeah, I like this idea that, that there's a power to memory, and the mindfulness is being mindful of what we dwell on, what memories we dwell on. Are we dwelling, replaying the bad memories again and again, kind of torturing ourselves with them, or are we cherishing and imprinting ourselves with the beautiful memories, and even allowing ourselves to remember the heroism and so on? Yeah.
I think it's also that the memories that we keep going back to are the same ones that are both beautiful and horrible. Like if you ask anybody who's gone through a divorce how they feel about the divorce at different stages further along away from the divorce, it's totally different. Like, I mean, it's completely and totally like time changes your perspective more than anybody remembers in the moment. Like it's almost impossible when you're in the moment fully, like you're having the experience to realize my heart's going to heal from this. I'm not going to be this fucking devastated in a couple, whatever, fill in the blank, however long it takes for you, so it's just that thing. The reason why people are always so like negative about rumination, but I feel like there's powerful direction in rumination. It's like, why are you ruminating on this? Why? There's a reason, and you'll figure it when you figure it out. That's when it'll release from that rumination and become revelation.
And just a final comment here, and then maybe you can comment, Brandy. I saw your hand up, but the final comment would be just that I've never really connected to people saying mindfulness, like, CBT has a lot of mindfulness, or I get it, but a lot of the mindfulness that I've heard is kind of just like, well, be mindful of just, I don't know, it hasn't really meant a lot, but I like the idea of being mindful of what you ruminate on, because I will tend to just ruminate on any and everything. And sometimes it's because I don't want to let go of something. And if I just actually can let go of it and sort of trust that I don't need that anymore, then something else will happen. And I mean, it definitely speaks to me, this I completely agree with you that we're ruminating for a reason. It's not for no reason, and that we shouldn't have some negative attitude about rumination. I also know that, speaking personally, there have been things that I've ruminated on that maybe my undefined spleen, who knows what, I just wasn't ready to let go of that. And I wasn't ready to actually grieve. It's almost like better to have this bad memory that I can hold on to that makes me, still have some emotional charge, than this fear of just letting go of it and losing it entirely. But then later, as you're saying, like the different phases of a divorce or some kind of traumatic experience, later you realize, wow, I actually did let go of that. I don't need it anymore, and now I'm being more mindful of what I do spend time ruminating on. So yeah, I'd love to hear your comments there, Randy, if you have anything about Gate 33 or any of this.
Yes, actually, I have this philosophy, and I think the stop codon really expresses it beautifully. And it is that all consciousness is doing here is telling stories. We're all telling, let's suppose there are 64 frequencies, and each of them has six times however many with bass and tone. And so that's how many frequencies there are available. And we're all telling the story verbally, neurologically, of that frequency. And each of us are designed to tell a very certain story. And so we get these experiences and feelings, and mindfulness means, what is my story? What is my story? What is remembering my self story, right? Because it's from the G center. So it's being mindful of not just what I'm ruminating over, but what stories I'm telling. And when those stories are told, just like magic, that frequency exits our bodies, and then we don't have that experience again. All stories are just looking to be told. And so I think that, well, with this stop codon, it's like, because it is a terminator codon in the DNA. So what it does is when your DNA and RNA are doing their dance that they do, there's a genetic sentence that is written, and there is either a 12, a 56, or a 33 at the end of that. And so I think when all of these sentences of stories that are describing these frequencies, when we get to the end of that, there's this 13, 56, or 12. Are we telling the story for ourselves? Are we telling the story for humanity? Or are we telling the story for another reason? There's always three involved: the he, the she, and the creation of that, of them coming together. And so not only is this like a being mindful of what's my story and what's your story, what story have I continued to tell over and over and over again that does not let my DNA hold the voltage that it is designed to hold? What is that story that I continue to tell over and over? When I be mindful, when I remember, when I'm intoxicated by myself, I no longer tell that story. It stops existing in my DNA 14 generations ahead and 14 generations behind.
I love that, Brandy. That is really beautiful and yeah, a really wonderful. I think that that's a good point to end on. I see your comment there, Sarak, that these gates are, yeah, DNA. Well, that's what they actually technically are. The stop codon. There's only one stop codon, but these three gates code for it, and it does. Or maybe there's, yeah, maybe there's three. I don't know, but there's only one start codon. That's right. There's three stop codons. Anyway, that's a whole different topic, but I would love to just end on what you were saying, Brandy, because that's just such a beautifully poetic idea. And as you were saying that, I was just kind of flashing back to like the time sitting around the fire and like even just hearing our own stories. And when we can finally let go of those stories and kind of live outside of those stories. And when we finally, I love that idea that we're in this story until we really become intoxicated with ourselves, and then the story no longer has to be told because
Then we
it's been
live the
given.
story.
Yeah,
Then we've
and then we're
remembered,
living it.
and
Oh, I
now
love
we're
that.
existing as it.
Well, I think that's a wonderful place to end for today. I really enjoyed that. And yeah, we never know what we're going to find when we start digging into this stuff. But I'm so glad that you were here because I know that you're quite versed in the gene keys, and I'd love to dig in with you more on these. And yeah, thank you, Rachel. Thanks, everyone. Now, Liz, Sirac. And yeah, great comment from Rachel. When we tell our story is when we let it go in a real way. So yeah, really wonderful stuff. And I will be back in half an hour. You're going to stick around, right, Brandy, for the personality session?
Yes, Richard and I will be here.
Yeah. So anybody who's been following along with us in personality typology and human design, in half an hour, we will be typing Brandy, and it'll be a fun one. So we'll be back in half an hour. Thank you all for joining. Take care.